All right, next question from Tucker the dog. I don't know if I don't know what that means, but I'm always happy to take questions from canines. In regards to the independent media environment, I am interested in your opinion of Tim Pool and Dave Rubin, and I think a few others, having a secretive meeting with Netanyahu. Do you think this is concerning for independent media? Do you have any ethical concerns, or is it a normal practice for journalists to meet with foreign leaders in this way to get out information? It is not unheard of for journalists to have off-the-record meetings with American political leaders and even foreign leaders. Obviously, why would a foreign leader want to meet in secret with a journalist, or why would a foreign leader want to meet in secret with influencers? Because they want to impart to them propaganda about why they should be more aligned with that country's agenda or that leader's way of thinking. Now, the people they met with are already very pro-Israel. Certain Dave Rubin, I mean, there's a picture that Dave Rubin posted of himself and Netanyahu. And I mean, it almost looks like he's in the middle of like some sort of sexual ecstasy. That's like a sustained one. I mean, he's standing next to Benjamin Netanyahu, who basically is his leader, Dave Rubin. Few people love, worship, and are more loyal to Israel than Dave Rubin. He got to stand next to Netanyahu. So I don't know what possible impact that could have. Dave Rubin was already somebody who puts Israel at the center of his world. I don't know how he could do that even more. Maybe he'll be like more excited, kind of like preaching to the choir can get the choir more excited, even though they were already on your side. Tim Pool, I don't want to make sweeping statements about his views on Israel. I know he's very pro-Israel, but I don't know that there's nuance there. I've seen a little bit, maybe. I just don't know enough to make definitive statements. But it's not that it's that unheard of. And my understanding is like Dave Rubin posted a picture of it. I think Tim Pool talked about it. I think that happened after it was disclosed, but they met under a set of rules that journalists use where you can't report on anyone who was at the meeting. You can't report on anything that was discussed, but you can disclose the fact of the meeting and just maybe like general impressions. So it was rules of secrecy, basically. They weren't allowed to quote Netanyahu. They weren't allowed to talk about what he said. And I do think this points to a problem in independent media. I think one of the problems that we were just talking about with corporate media is that they became too partisan, too ideological, too willing to act subserviently to a particular faction, the U.S. security state, the Democratic Party, whatever. And I think there's definitely that same problem in independent media. I've talked before about how the easiest way to have success, financial success, rating success in this new independent media environment is to plant your flag in one faction and say, this is who I am, this is where I am, this is who I defend, this is the ideology I believe in, I'm never going to deviate from it. You attract all the people who believe in that ideology or who are loyal to that party or to that faction, and they want to hear their views validated all the time. And you can build a very big audience of people who just want to kind of keep informational closure and always have their views validated and never challenged, let alone rejected. And a lot of people making a lot of money in independent media doing that. And you know, I think I absolutely believe that the emergence of independent media is a net good, just for the reason that it increases the amount of alternatives people have. And there are people who have thrived in independent media who have not succumbed to that kind of groupthink or audience capture. Joe Rogan probably being the best example. Joe Rogan does not sit there and just praise the Republican Party. He's always had kind of a mixture of views. He has guests on who have a very wide-ranging set of ideas. And he obviously became the most popular program in the country. Now, it's a little different because Joe Rogan's program is not primarily political. Sometimes it's political. But, you know, it's cultural. He considers himself a comedian. He has a lot of comedians on, actors, celebrities, and a lot of apolitical content. Just kind of along the way, there's political content. So But I'm talking about political shows. It's difficult to be successful as a political show unless you do that. And once you do that, in a lot of ways, you become no different than the corporate media. Now they have a lot of proximity to power. You know, if you're suddenly now, because you cheered on MAGA, you cheered on Trump every day, now you're getting invited to the White House, you're being let in on secret meetings, the Trump White House is calling you, giving you little tidbits. To what extent is that really independent media? I mean, I've always believed it's important to keep people in power at a distance, at arm's length. The minute you start befriending them, the minute you start talking to them too much, the minute you start, you know, succumbing to the temptations of being let into their world, and, you know, people with power, they can open doors. Like, oh, I get to go to the White House, I get to have a meeting with a foreign leader. Not just a foreign leader, but like the Prime Minister of Israel. Of course that's going to compromise your independence. Or maybe not, of course, maybe you can resist that and fight against that. But it's certainly going to have a big effect. That's why I've always hated anything that reeks of journalists and political power merging socially or in any other way. Like that White House Correspondents' Dinner, I absolutely despise it. It makes me sick to my stomach. Where they all dress up as if they're like at the Oscars and they get to meet like B-list celebrities and like chatter at the White House with the president. And it's just so corrupting. It creates just like this culture of Versailles. You know, like you're either in the royal court or you're not. And a lot of these people have not been in the royal court. They have been outsiders. And now suddenly their party, their faction, their candidate is in power. And so are they. And you think, having sat there and met with Netanyahu, getting invited to these events, that they're going to now go and criticize Trump even when he warrants it? Or criticize Netanyahu, who they just sat in a small group with, who knows very well how to manipulate Americans, as he posted up before? And on some level, the issue of audience capture can actually be more problematic in independent media. It didn't used to be such a problem in corporate media years ago, in the decades I was describing earlier, because when there was only ABC, NBC, and CBS, they were the only games in town. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, your local newspaper. But it was a place everybody felt more or less trusting of in terms of getting the news from, because they were not overtly partisan. Like I said, they had other biases, but it wasn't so overtly partisan. Now there is absolutely audience capture among corporate media. The vast majority of the New York Times subscribers, vast majority, are liberals. They hate Trump. Same with the Washington Post. They had mass cancellations of subscriptions when Jeff Bezos barred them from endorsing Kamala Harris. Obviously, the cable outlets all have their audiences, and you actually saw that with Fox, which I personally do believe is the most independent of the three cable networks, for reasons I can explain, but not really relevant now. But when Trump was telling everybody the 2020 election was the byproduct of fraud, that Biden's victory was fraudulent, byproduct of voter fraud, many, maybe even most people on Fox were not on board with that. And some of them actually were opposed to it. Tucker Carlson went on the air and ranted and raved about the dishonesty of Sidney Powell, how she keeps making these grandiose claims that she has all this proof, but then every time he invites her on to show it, she won't come on. She never shows this proof. And a lot of Fox viewers started getting very angry because they were loyal to Trump, and Trump was saying this is what happened, and Fox wasn't saying that, but Newsmax was. Newsmax was totally on board. And you saw this migration of a good number of people, a good number of conservatives, away from Fox to Newsmax. And as a result, Fox started getting more receptive to the fraud narrative. That is a kind of audience capture that I think is new for corporate media, because they are now all in silos. You know who the audience is of each one of these outlets. But I think with independent media, because shows and independent journalists rely on their viewers, not just for ratings, not just to show up, but also for financial support, most independent media shows, most independent journalists can't make a living unless they have their readers and viewers supporting them financially, monthly subscriptions or donations or whatever, that's what independent media does rely on mostly, then many of them become afraid to say anything that might alienate them. I mean, I've been through this many times in my career, where you take a position that you know is going to alienate a lot of your audience, and you can watch them go away, the subscriptions drop and fall. But I would way rather have fewer viewers and make less money and know that I'm not imprisoned to say things I don't really believe to keep my audience happy. I've never had a viewership or a readership that expected me to do that or wanted me to do that. And I think it's really commendable for people who consume news to stay with somebody even when they're saying things that are so against your views, as long as you think they're doing their best to be honest. You can be challenged by it. I think it's boring to listen to somebody who agrees with me all the time. I really do. I don't like it. I don't find it compelling or engaging. There's too much agreement. It's like we're already on the same wavelength. So I do think independent media is an absolute positive. I've been a big defender of it. I still am. I think free speech on the internet is the most important thing. But I also think there are some important vulnerabilities independent media has, some of which are shared by corporate media and some of which are more inherent to corporate media to independent media that I think are worth being aware of. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.